All right.
Cool.
And we should be live.
Sweet.
All right.
Yes, I am seeing us live. Cool.
And we should be live.
Huzzah.
Pat 66,
Hey,
good
Pat.
to see you, sir.
God, you're always here. Every time. I love your shirt, by the way.
I figured it was the most appropriate shirt I could possibly wear for this.
I don't have a very Bard shirt, so I'm just rocking the blue box.
Hey, Jay, good to see you. I hope you are finally over the Gary Con crud.
Always got to get over the con crud. No. Aw.
Mike Disney, awesome.
Man.
Good to see you. All right. We are right now. It's Thomas and myself. We are kind of holding out just maybe a couple minutes more to see whether or not Evelyn is able to join us.
It's funny, Pat, that you mentioned Alcott could be tweaked to be a bard. My initial concept for Alcott was for him to be a bard. But then I decided I liked wizard better. But I do have a couple of fun bards that I have played or want to play at some point that we might be talking about tonight. Depends on what we get to.
Have you gotten any response?
I have not.
Okay.
So I think that we're solidly in the it's just you and me tonight.
All right. Well, in that case, let's show them our pretty faces.
Our pretty faces. I don't have one of those.
Well. And there we go.
Huzzah.
So, welcome to everyone to tonight's episode of Loremaster's Arcanum. Well, I mean, I don't know if Thomas and I really need introductions at this point, but for those of you who don't, for those of you who might actually be new here, it's possible there may be someone. I'm Rob. In Discord, I'm known as Phantom NJ. On Twitter as Phantom NJ underscore D&D. And I will be the guest host for tonight. And joining me tonight is, normally he's, wizard extraordinaire, but tonight he's going to put his bard hat on because we are going to be talking about bards, masters of inspiration, and some of the challenges surrounding them, as well as some of the possibilities. So, with me is Thomas.
Hello, hello. You know me all over the box.
Hmm.
So, what are we chatting about?
Well, that was very straightforward.
Hey, like you said, I need no introduction.
I see what we're talking about. All right, so in the annals of D&D, and I've been playing. Yeah, we had a. Unfortunately, the people who can actually update the titles are not appearing in this picture.
Not appearing in this film, yes.
So I've got the lovely title up on. Pay no attention to the
Yes.
lower left hand corner. Pay attention to the upper left hand corner. Yeah, in the annals of D&D, has there, with the possible exception of the paladin jokes about lawful stupid and all that, and that's a story for another time. And John's not here, so we're not going to argue about it. Has there ever been a class that has gotten more memes and cliches than the bard?
I mean, to be fair, I think you could argue for rogue and barbarian, but that's just because they're so what they are. I think every class has its stereotype, right? It's one sort of trope of that class, but you are certainly correct in that the most memed is the bard for sure.
And there is the running joke, and it really, I mean, I think it's almost a rite of passage that anytime any D&D group gets together, there's eventually going to be a conversation about the bard trying to seduce something the bard should probably not have tried to seduce.
Usually a dragon, but yes.
A dragon. Hey, Vamp Wickman. Speaking of bards trying to seduce things that turned out to be problematic. Oh boy.
Jeez.
That was nearly a very unfortunate ending. It was a very entertaining ending, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, yeah. Vamp Wickman was playing a bard in a one shot that I was running, and his the object of his affection turned out to be not only an anti paladin but also a werewolf. Much hilarity
The worst
ensued,
combo.
and kind of found out as he was on his way that that there was a problem here. But it all worked out okay. He may have gotten bitten, but we'll see what happens next time we get to run them. I mean, the interesting thing though, with regards to bards is, in terms of D&D anyway, they didn't start out that way. As a matter of fact, in terms of the classic, or what's considered the best well-known bard trope, and for lack of a term, basically the promiscuous minstrel.
Mm-hmm.
It, it started off at least in first edition, AD, back in AD&D first edition. It was actually pretty much a prestige class. You could not start off as a bard at level 1. You could not start off a bard. You couldn't start off being a bard until you were on your 11th level in.
Wow. And according to Gygax, that is late game.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. There was a couple things to it. It wasn't even. This was back in the days when classes had. It wasn't just that classes had stats that you wanted to have. That you had to have levels of stats. And I mean, try rolling this character up. I mean, it's funny. Now we're in the days of point buys and such. You can't even do this with point buy.
Yeah.
For a bard to just create a character who might eventually become a bard, you have to have a 15 strength, a 15 wisdom, a 15 dexterity, a 15 charisma. Oh, and by the way, a 12 intelligence and a 10 constitution to go along with it.
What the heck? The one thing I am most curious about is why such a high strength?
Funny you should ask that. Bards, when you're picking a character that you wanted to first level as a bard, you actually started leveling as a fighter. And you had to have at least 5 levels of fighter. And I think it was like 5 levels, and I think it might have been like 9th level. You couldn't go above 9th level or whatever. 5 levels of fighter, at which point you switched over to becoming a thief.
Makes sense.
And you had to do 5 levels of thief, thus needing the high dexterity. When you finally got through all that, and you had done your 10 levels, then and only then did you get to take a level of bard. Was it 5, 6 min, 7, 8 max? All right. Yep.
Man, can you imagine pouring in 14 levels just to get bard?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, on the sliding scale of XP, it wasn't. It's a long time to wait just in game terms, but when you're talking about XP, once you go to the next level and you're going, it's not like you're doing thief level 6. You're going thief level 1.
Yeah.
So 1 to 5 is a much shorter wait than trying to do the 6 to 10.
Oh, is that how that worked?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you weren't getting. It wasn't like you were getting level 6 thief abilities. You were getting level 1 thief abilities.
Well, because now, right, in more modern editions of D&D, it's XP based on character level total, not on individual class levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so you worked leveling up your character up to max 20 for your character level. It didn't matter what levels of class you took from then on. The next level was, if you were going from 12 wizard, 1 bard was the same as 13 wizard.
Yeah.
At least now.
Back then, not so much. Um,
Well, that is a bit more helpful, I guess.
so I mean, you get to that point. Yeah. Um. All right. Yeah. That's the part I forgot about, Jay. The fact that in order to get the abilities of both, you had to exceed the first class
In hit points?
in levels. So like you had to have that minimum
Oh,
of 5 of fighter. Then you needed to have 6 so you could keep the abilities of both.
wow.
And as Dorgrim points out, thief levels were pretty quick to get.
So different classes. Man, I'm learning so much about AD&D.
Well, actually, if you want to see an example in terms of the different classes leveling at different rates, check out Castles and Crusades. It follows that same model.
Hmm.
Different classes level up at different XP rates. So the interesting thing then at that point is, you were basically had a limited subset of druid spells. It wasn't, you weren't basically becoming doing wizard. It was more, it had more of a Celtic feel to it. It
Yeah.
wasn't, this wasn't your strolling minstrel. This was the lore keeper.
Yeah. I mean, the
And such.
definition of a bard,
Yeah, yeah,
reciting epics and tales of the oral tradition.
exactly. Uh, you know, when they went to second edition, the bard, instead of becoming a prestige class, became its own class, more on the roguish side. Uh, they still kept, for some strange reason, in second edition, they still kept you could only be a bard if you were a human or a half elf, and then that stayed in second edition, I believe, and I don't honestly understand why. Um, the ability score requirements came down much, really high. A lot. It went from, you had to have a 12 dexterity, a 13 intelligence, and a 15 charisma. I mean, even now, even if you were doing a point by system, you could easily hit that. That
Oh, yeah.
you're going to have those, so it wasn't that big a deal. Um, and they started the movement to jack of all trades. It was, thing they could do a little bit of thieving, have a little bit of thieving skills. Actually, it is kind of sort. I mean, other than the fact that now you can be any race you want, it did have more of a feel, in terms of what 5e has now.
Yeah.
It was much closer. They
I
did
like the whole
have,
jack of all trades thing. Like
yeah.
in terms of a story thing, right? You've got a person who wanders around. They're going to pick up lots of random skills as they do this, whether they're, jack of all trades, master of none, that they're just kind of good at a lot of things because they have to be able to
Mhm.
survive on the road.
Now, the other interesting thing, if like for first and second edition, was the alignment requirements. In first edition and in second edition, they had to be some variation on neutral. They could be true neutral if you wanted to. They could be lawful neutral, which, when you think about it, yeah, if you're going with the whole Celtic style, or like a scald or something, yeah, I can see that. Now the idea of a lawful neutral bard seems almost absurd. I
Yeah.
actually, that would be a great character. Honestly, I would love to see somebody playing a lawful neutral bard.
You know what? I'll make a lawful neutral bard for you. I'll figure out a way to do it.
Not that alignment goes very, very integral to the game anymore, or at least not.
No, but as from a role playing standpoint, I still find it to be extremely important.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where you get into the idea of modern day bards with our memes and tropes tend to be chaotic something. Because I mean, just look at Cade.
Mm-hmm.
Cade is a
Huh.
very good example.
So I'm going to be completely honest. I never played third edition or 3.5.
Hmm.
Honestly, I mean, it's kind of fun. I played a couple of sessions that John has run that were, yeah, 3 point something.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
the first, strangely enough, I think the first pure third edition game that I ever played in was Gary Con last week.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was actually run. It was actually run by Skip Williams, one of the people who was responsible for D&D third edition.
So you're not very aware of how bards work in third edition, then, are you?
No, actually, and go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Because I actually, like I said, Alcott was originally spec'd as a bard, and my current backup character for Alcott is a bard because I like bards. I like magic casters. I don't know if you can tell, but bards I think are that fun mix between being able to at least mildly hold their own in physical combat. Like you said, in older editions, they were fighters first. But I like that idea, and I don't know exactly how bard inspiration worked in older editions, or if it was even a thing at all, or if they were just spellcasters in general, and that was what you got. But in 3.5 or in 3E, you get the ability to, you essentially just like you're casting certain types of songs throughout battle, right? So like Irda has her raging song that she plays while we fight, which grants certain bonuses to strength and will saves, but minuses to AC. It essentially gives you a buffed up version of rage to your party. Or you could be playing a counter charm song that throughout the duration of your song, all of your allies have pluses against charm spells. You essentially have to pick which specific song, and it's not necessarily a song, right? Like it can be interpreted in maybe you're orating, or you are you could be doing a dance of some sort, right? Because in third edition there are lots of different specific skills for performance. I don't know if that's the case in older editions of D&D, but you've got acting, comedy, string instruments, wind instruments, dance, all of these different types of things that you can do, that allow you to affect battle in more unique individual ways that are kind of specific, almost, I would say almost near to what fourth edition does with like maneuvers and such, like at will powers and
Okay.
per combat, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes sense, and you can see like at that point the bard is moving squarely into the support class category,
Yeah.
where they're, they're part of their job is buffing. Really, honestly, a major part of their job is providing buffs to the party and potentially debuffs to the enemies. Yeah, where
Yeah,
before
and you
it
can do
was,
the same
yeah.
in third edition. Like I like that too, right? Because like bards, and that's one thing that I like about certain spells, like vicious mockery, right? Like bards are snide little, making remarks about the enemies as much as they're buffing up their own allies, hidden jokes in their songs and speech. I love that.
Question: would that make Spider-Man a bard?
You know, I don't see why not, right? You don't have to sing to be a bard.
Eh,
You can be any kind of bard you want to be. That's funny.
he's got some stealthiness to him. He's
Yeah,
got some
probably
got
like
some
a
got some ranged
multi-class.
attacks.
Yeah, he might even just be full bard.
Eh, definitely has the vicious mockery going on. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. We
Ki-
did get an updated stream info, by the way. We are now sitting with the correct title on our stream.
Aha, uh-huh.
Huzzah!
I think that means somebody snuck into the channel.
Yes, I think somebody did.
Oh boy.
So that's third edition. I've never played fourth edition, and I know you've done a decent little bit of fourth. What
I
were
did,
they like in
yeah.
fourth?
I don't know that, it's funny. We did, I only did one campaign. Actually, I played in one campaign, fourth edition, and DM'd one. But I don't know that we had a bard in the group. Now, actually, one of the, they, at this point, the fourth edition they moved them, I believe, into the arcane class because fourth edition basically split them up in the classes up in four different group. I think it's four different groupings. There was martial, there was arcane, there was divine, and I am going primal. So arcane
It's
would have
like,
been
yeah.
your pure spell casting like wizards. I don't remember if the sorcerers in fourth edition, but those kind of classes. Your
Mhm.
wizards, your illusionists, and such. Uh, primal would have been druids and things of that nature. Druids is probably the most obvious one. I think barbarians would have been. I think barbarians actually ended up being primal.
Which
Martial
makes
would have
sense.
been any of the non-spellcasting fighting classes, even stuff like rogues and such would be martial. And then divine, obviously, you had your clerics, your paladins, anything that had basically from a deity was getting their powers.
Hmm.
Um,
So that's
they
actually
yeah.
an interesting point you've brought up is where do bards sit amongst the arcane, divine, and primal? Because you said in first edition they were essentially druids,
Yeah,
and
first edition they would have been well, first edition, I mean, when you got to be a bard, it would they were basically primal powers. I mean,
yeah,
because it was a druidic thing.
but coming
Um,
from a martial background, because
yeah,
fighters and thief levels, those are fairly martial classes. But now when you look at bards, they're that middle point between arcane and divine.
yeah,
Depending on how you role play it, you can play a bard who worships a goddess or a god, and that's what they do.
oh for sure. Uh, and then of course fifth edition came around.
Yes,
I've played bard. I mean, fifth edition. One thing I like about one of the things I like about bards. I think bards is one of those classes that was actually served really well by fifth edition. Um,
yeah,
Mostly because of the fact that with the subclasses, you could literally have every type of bard you can think of.
I did this. I ran a one shot for a group of traveling minstrels that were all just bards. They didn't have any levels in any other classes. They were all bards, and it was great fun. Like you could ask most people who play a good bit of fifth edition, what is the most powerful class in 5e? Bard will be 90% of the answers that you get.
Funny that you should mention that. Apparently, when whoever wrote the wiki article for this uh, got some stats or some polling data
Oh
for
yeah.
it. Um, so it appears that Screen Rant rated the. Oh well, actually, I guess they just did their own rating. They didn't care what anyone else thought.
Mm.
Rated the Bard as the ninth most powerful class of the base 12 character classes in fifth edition.
Oh no way. No
So now,
way.
mind you, that's based on the initial set of subclasses that were available.
Fair.
Uh, I honestly do think the fifth edition Bard, because I remember one of the campaigns that I was playing in. It was actually run by somebody from somebody from I guess I don't know which community it was. It was someone in the Greyhawk community. Um, and I remember the bard just basically being able to do a little bit of everything. It
Yeah.
was they were spot healing. They were basically actually almost acting as a primary healer. They were the party thief. They were whatever you needed. They were doing.
Despite there is a certain cleric subclass in 5e that essentially makes you the healer, period, the life domain.
Hmm.
Other than that, you can have a bard be the full healer of the party and also have multi attack and also be able to cast ninth level spells from any spell class list because they have arcane mysteries after 10th level. They can pull a spell from any class list. And their class list is essentially like the moderate bests of both cleric and wizard mixed
Hmm.
together. It's ridiculous. Bards are very, very good, and they get expertise, which is a little known or a little gathered feature that I think only rogue also gets. And oh man,
You know what? Go ahead and
jack of all
just,
trades is also really, really good.
if you want to talk a little bit about what the expertise gives them, that, you know.
Sure. So like for anyone who doesn't play fifth edition, the way that you get your skills to increase in the modifier that you apply to them is your character becomes proficient in them. And usually your class gives you a limited range of skills that you can become proficient in, which your proficiency modifier is what you add to your base modifier for that skill check. So like for a performance check, you would add your charisma. And if you were proficient in performance, you would add your proficiency modifier, which normally at level 1 is a +2. You then, as you level up, it maximizes at +5. However, if you are an expert in a skill, you double your proficiency bonus for that, essentially saying you have poured lots and lots of your time into studying this craft, and you are very, very proficient in it, which at higher levels in fifth edition, you don't see the crazy modifiers that you see in like in third edition per se, like what Irid is rolling with like a +25 on some of her skill checks.
Yeah,
But
every time you all do that, I'm just like, my
oh
brain
yeah, I mean
just my
Alcott
brain
has I
hurts.
think +27 on his knowledge arcana, which is, it's ridiculous to me. We're only level 13 and that's so crazy. But like in fifth edition, you see much lower the roll ceiling is much lower. However, with expertise, bards can get way up there. And not only that, their modifier floor is brought way up because of what's called jack of all trades in fifth edition is essentially anything you are not proficient in, you get to add half your proficiency bonus to, which is crazy.
Yeah. So Pat Draws asked an interesting question. Do you think Vox Machina is pigeonholing the class as kind of a joke class? No, I don't. You know, I'll be honest with you, Pat. For me personally, I don't know that it's them pigeonholing. You know, I'm not quite up on the timeline as far as when it all began, but it seems like the idea of the bard just being this outrageous character has been going for quite some time. And frankly, you know, you get somebody who's gonna, you know, you get basically an actor, even if it's, you know, whether it's stage acting, whatever, but voice acting, somebody's just, they're gonna play into it.
Yeah,
And they, you know, Sam played into that
Sam played into
heavily.
it. I could actually, I do have a couple of thoughts on this because personally, Scanlan Shorthalt is one of my favorite characters of all time, because Sam is an incredible actor and a very good player of D&D. But I don't think that was limited to him being a bard. What I think he did with the character was really interesting. Not only that they basically started playing 5e when it first came out. That is so it just so happened that one of the most famous bards in 5e is the most trope bard of 5e. That being said, Vox Machina is recently becoming a bit more famous with the TV show that came out and all that stuff. So people are becoming more and more aware of who Scanlan is. But later in their campaign, Scanlan changes. He becomes a bard that, learns that being scandalous all the time and sleeping with everyone who you can find is maybe not the best way to live your life, because again, Sam is a really good player of D&D and he knows how to tell an outrageously good story. And I think that like one of the main points that I think both Rob and I are trying to make tonight is like, you don't have to limit yourself to just that trope. You can take that to its extreme, which Sam did. And he had an accidental child that he didn't know about that his character had to deal with. And that had repercussions throughout the entire story that was really, really fun. It was great. And I think that you can really have a lot of fun with Bard as a concept, as sort of a framework, and build something unique with it. Like I've got a couple of fun bards in my back pocket that I play that I do not think are the trope of bard, but they do play on it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the other interesting thing about it, I was thinking about this before with the whole trope of the bard, just basically sleeping their way around. It's like, well, it's funny how it ends up being them. I mean, I guess if you go with the idea of entertainers and
Hmm.
you're making the assumption, it's almost like the rock star mentality,
Yeah.
because you think about it, they're not the only, and from the beginning they haven't been the only heavily charisma based class. I mean, first edition paladins, actually every edition paladin.
Yeah.
Um, in if you go in five, I don't remember about 4E, but 5E you've got the warlock, which
The
I still
sorcerer.
don't. Or is it the sorcerer? I know one
Both.
of the two.
Both are charisma casters.
Both are charisma casters, which I find curious. uh
Well, that's a different topic for another day, but one I also find curious too. But
so
you're
it's
totally
like, yeah.
right. Charisma can be interpreted in lots of different ways. Like, and I know that this is a controversial stat that used to exist, but comeliness was a stat at one point, right? Like charisma was how your I view charisma as your force of presence in a room, but a lot
Hmm.
of people nowadays view charisma as your character's physical abilities to like and entice people and but in
Yeah.
modern 5e you can have saving throws of any type, right? And so banishment is a charisma saving throw. It is your presence in your very space. It is your ability to hold a room. I think that's what charisma really comes down to, which is why I think it highly represents paladins and bards.
Yeah. Unfortunately, thankfully, well, comeliness started in, not at the beginning of first edition, but when Unearthed Arcana came out. And I yeah, that was a stat that just, I I was early teens, and I'm still like, this is just dumb.
Yeah,
I'm
why is this
sorry.
here?
I'm like, why
Yeah.
I seriously questioned, just what the thinking was. But I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I might. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Jay, you've been playing the same game for 40 something years now. What are you going to
Yeah, I don't
do?
think you're planning on changing anytime soon. Yeah.
It's, I just, I didn't, it was one of those things that was one of the things that really, really bothered me about Unearthed Arcana, because I just was like, you don't have to, it was a stat that wasn't necessary. I mean, really, honestly, it was a stat that all it did was give one more thing, certain classes had to meet, because I don't know that it was actually, I don't remember it actually being used for anything other than a stat requirement to be a certain class. Um, which it just, yeah,
Yeah.
was not a fan.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
Have you ever played a bard before?
I played a bard on a blue box, blue box. Actually, it was, I believe, virtual Greyhawk Con.
How many bards have you played then?
Oh,
Because a lot of people have favorite classes, right? And so like mine sits between barbarian, bard, and wizard. I don't tend to play a lot of the other ones. Um, I didn't know if bard was one of yours.
I mean, well, first of all, and up until like the last 2 years, most of the time I'm on the DM side of the table.
Yeah,
Um, but I played the bard. Actually, it was the bard in the game. Mike Disney was part of that group, uh, where we were going up against the Overgord,
that's
and
right.
with exception of one, all of us died except for one who ran away. Uh, yeah, that was brutal, but it was a bard. I've played I've played at least one other bard in the last couple of years. I mean, it's okay. I'm more on the DM side of the
Yeah,
table, and nowadays, even if I was playing a bard, um, I'd be or for bards these days. I'm more looking at castles and crusades than anything else.
So, if you don't mind my asking, what kind of bard were they? Were they the trope of bards, or were they just sort of another guy in the party?
Mine was a minstrel. He was definitely. We didn't get to go along very much with it. He did use his charisma to, in terms of outside of combat. Part of it was in a bar, and I was playing a half orc bard of all things, and let's just say there was another half orc who took exception to my presence, and I took great fun in torturing him in various charismatic ways.
Yeah, it can be very fun.
Oh yeah, yeah.
See, for me, I have two bards that I've basically uh, fallen in love with and played that I would not say are like maybe over the top. One of them it can be a little bit. One of them is a rogue bard mix, which is I guess a bard originally. But he's a con man who uses his magic and smooth talking to be able to trick people into, doing lots of stuff. And I went out of my way and I did a bunch of research on like how to run cons and stuff. Like I'm definitely on an FBI watch list of some kind. I have to be at this point. There's no way I'm not. Like when you're playing D&D, the amount of random stuff you have to research, like how much does the internal organs of a cow weigh? um but like things like creating a fake ruby using like a minor illusion in a box that actually has a rock in it while singing a song that the song is laced with the magical words that create that illusion to entice people to buy this box with a rock in it for a lot of money. Like that, I found that to be genuinely very fun. And what was really fun about it is running those cons. I didn't tell my DM about them in preparation for them, and I actually genuinely conned my DM. He was surprised at the outcome of what was going on, and I love that I got to do that. It felt really weird for me as a human being, knowing that I could probably be a con man if I wanted to be, but it was fun, and like using charisma in that way of taking from the rich, giving to myself type thing was really, really interesting. And I think that's a bard can easily do. I think bard rogue is a fun multi-class.
I could see that. Yeah, actually, I was thinking about it. I mean, I did have one other bard. It was more of a DMPC that I had for my fifth edition campaign. I recently retired him because we had four players, and I wanted to do some stuff with them that was going to require, somebody who had some kind of thieving abilities and such. So I created the character uh, to go along with as an NPC to go along with the party. Didn't join the party until they were like level 3 or 4, and once they hit like level 10, I had him go off and do his own thing. He was more of the he did the standard minstrel stuff. He wasn't the seduce everything type.
Yeah.
However, his big thing was basically writing the story of the party. So the party had a very, very vested interest in keeping the poor halfling bard alive.
Yeah. So I play in a weekly game of GURPS. I don't know if you've ever played GURPS.
Mm-hmm.
Um
I've
my
never played. I've never played it, but I am familiar at least.
Yeah. We were playing in because GURPS is not a specific world, it's the generic universal role-playing
Well,
system, which is the most hilarious name ever. But we're playing in my DM's world, and so one of my Chandler is playing, who plays Markov. He plays a gleeman named Guy Lavelle, and his whole thing is he prefers to orate and tell stories from
mm-hmm.
a sort of a narrative perspective, but he also understands that he's going to make the majority of his money in taverns by singing songs and playing on his hurdy-gurdy.
Hmm.
But his whole thing is he writes down the details of what happens as we adventure. And Chandler will actually like write out little stories as sort of a writing challenge for himself to better his own sort of vocabulary in the way that he does what he does. You know, Chandler is going to be a lawyer, and he is a man of speech by uh, all notions. That is what he does and is. But he has a genuinely fun time just writing down the stories that the party does, because that's, I mean,
Well,
originally that's
listen.
what bards were, right? That's what they do.
Hmm. They're the lore keeper, and
I mean, look at The Witcher, right? Like, you've got Dandelion who follows around Geralt all the time, just singing his songs to the people who will hear it just to make a buck on the side. And, you know, of course, inflating the stories to make them more interesting. But I think that's what a good bard does.
yeah, I mean, that's it's kind of what the character I created for my players, as far as to go along with them. Um, and I was able, I had a really, really good excuse for him to go off and do his own thing for a while because of the fact that my roles for him were terrible at
Ah,
times. So, or more to the point, anytime he got attacked, my rolls against him were great. So there was a point where I think like in 4 separate weeks, I had reduced him to 0, and a couple of times
oof,
within a death save of dying.
physically not doing well.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, no, he was he might have been traumatized a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. But like, one thing that I really like about third edition is there's not just one type of performance you can make. The backup character I have for Alcott is a dancer, a bard that does not play music. In fact, it it's an idea I've been throwing around, but because we are high level enough, I think John would allow me to do it. Of having a permanently animated musical instrument that follows him around, that plays music for
Hmm.
him. He dances along to it. And what's really cool is there's actually a bard. It's not called subclass in third edition. They're called archetype, which essentially just swaps out some of the abilities you get at different levels for other ones, called the duettist, which essentially allows you to play two different bard songs at the same time, which is really, really interesting.
Hmm.
And I think it's a fun concept. Uh, which I mean, like in 5e, there's a crazy amount of subclasses at this point. One of my favorites is the orator, but there's, I mean, so many subclasses for, especially for bards.
Yeah, all the different colleges. You got the
Yep.
college glamour charm for charming other creatures. Yeah,
Gosh.
I mean you can be whatever type of bard you wanted to be. So switching gears for a minute, you know, what do you think it takes from you have a character player who's playing a bard. What as a DM do you think you can do to assist in having the character be something more than I mean, hey, listen, if the player wants to play the cliche bard,
Yeah.
if it makes them happy, let them go. But if they're looking to do something more, what do you think some of the things a DM could do to enable a a deeper level of play from a person playing a bard?
This is a really fun question. I think there's a very good and recent example that you can see in our most recent episode of Rune Lords, where all of us were there, where Cade went into the bar and John had one of the NPCs ask Cade to tell him a story, which is a very Cade thing to do. And having recently been taking levels in Bard, Cade absolutely obliged. And what was really, really fun about that moment is Chandler, Evelyn, and I joined in as members of the bar around. We weren't joining in with the story. We became NPCs in that moment, and we were just sort of hyping up the bard to tell this story. And that depends on how you are in the context of it, right? Like if your PCs are there, you can join in. But I think that like understanding that you have a bard in your party, this is a storyteller, don't step on their toes and start telling the story for them. Uh, as a person at the table with a bard with you, that is what they do. They tell stories. And I think asking them to tell you stories is one of the most bard questions you can ask a bard to do. That's probably one of my best answers as a DM. But there's lots of other things you can do too, right? Like putting social situations, social puzzles in front of your party that cannot just be solved with, can I hit it with an axe really hard? I think is, or can I cast knock on the door type thing.
I mean, it occurs to me that, another one would be, especially when you start getting to be higher level and you start dealing with more important people in your game, your campaign setting, diplomacy. You
Yes.
would think that a bard, assuming that they're not playing the, way, 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 way down, would be the type to understand how you could have a bard that they're the ones who understand how things work. They know how to find the right people to get influence. It's
Yep.
um
And let them do
let
that.
them, yeah.
Like allow them into those circles, those social circles, because I mean, even kings had a court jester. Like everyone enjoys a little entertainment at the highest of levels, right? So if you just allow them to, even on a moderate roll, convince at least them to get into a room to maybe play some music in the background, hear in on some things that are going on, that's totally fine. I have not played in very many political intrigue campaigns. I think political intrigue campaigns are very fun. They're hard to do as a DM to make like genuinely compelling and interesting political intrigue campaigns. But if you're in one of those, I think absolutely you're totally right. Let your bard just move around social circles and get involved with what's going on in the background.
Yeah, I think in that sense, one of the things that you need is the characters who are willing to stick around someplace.
Yeah.
Some players they'll decide to have a home base, but they're just going all over the world. Whereas next adventure, the epic quest is going to take them somewhere. If you're sticking, a bard in the context of a city camp, if you're running a city based campaign, having a
Yeah.
bard is probably
Bard's a very good class to
yeah.
be.
I'd almost consider it. I'd almost consider it a necessity to have
Yeah.
one. Just because of all the things that it can bring.
Or perhaps a more social rogue of sorts could be
Mm-hmm.
a good one as well. But I mean, honestly, if you were to define Bard, I would say it's a social rogue.
Yeah, I can go along with that. Makes sense.
I think another one, another good example is if you remember in the dungeon of, I don't think it was, I think it maybe it was Ixen's dungeon, or maybe it was the dungeon of the Golem Maker. There was a door with a skull on it that talked to the party,
Mm-hmm.
and we couldn't figure out how to get through it. I wasn't there for this session, but Irda and Cade, the two bards of the party, annoyed the crap out of it until it opened up. That was a social solution to a physical problem. And I think as a DM, allowing those to happen, even if it wasn't your original intended solution to the puzzle, is fun.
That's amazing. I love that.
Oh, yeah. They just annoyed the crap out of it till it said, all right, whatever, you're getting through. I don't care. You're obviously not going away.
I can almost hear now. Why should I let you in? Because I'm Cade. That's why.
That's why. You're totally right.
Don't you know who I am? I'll tell you again. Oh wow. Yeah. No. So for the chat, do you have any
Any bardly
things
questions?
regarding bards? Questions?
Any thoughts, ideas? I like bards. I think that if you want to play a magic user and you're not exactly sold on the concept, look at bards, because they are a good middle of the road that don't have they're not like wizards, right? They don't have expansive, massive spell lists and way too many options and you're spoiled by choice. They're pretty straight and simple down the road, like especially with Jack of all trades and stuff like that. If we're talking modern editions of D&D, monks and mutton chops are so much more interesting.
I would be open to running a bard only one shot. A bard only one shot.
I would love
My
a bard
my
only one
requirement would be if let's put this way, if we're gonna do a Bard only one shot, I would do a 5e one shot, and the requirement would be all five have to be from have a different subclass.
Yes. I actually I wrote a one shot for bards that was based on them in college, Bard College, and they were in some sort of a musical competition that involved, obviously dungeon like puzzles and monsters and stuff to fight. But
You know, it's kind of funny. The fact that the 5e Bard with the subclasses allows you to become very specific types of bards. It's one of those one of those things where you kind of need to decide what kind of bar really almost more than anything else, what kind of bar do you want to be, because it's going to be probably pretty different than the others.
yeah,
I mean, spellcasters, some of them, okay, there are some differences, but
I mean, if you're a wizard, you're just picking a school of magic, right? Which is you're just a
yeah,
wizard, right? But
I
you're
mean,
totally right. With bard, like valor bards are basically like they're warrior singers. They get on the battlefield and I imagine them like drummer boys in an army. Like they are there specifically to encourage the battle as it is taking place from a musical standpoint, which is a very different type of bard to a lore bard who is there to tell the stories of old to people who would be willing to hear them. But it's still a music player who is there to do magic for the party.
and the funny thing is, it's like I think about that. It's like, well, is that a good thing? It definitely opens up or really helps along the concept of the as in terms of the role play and helping the person understand what they need to look at. I don't
Mm-hmm.
it's I don't know that I'm crazy about the idea of the character potentially being pigeonholed once I choose that. And there are times when it's like, as long as you made the right choice, awesome. If you suddenly
Yeah.
realize that I don't really like how this is working out,
See, for
uh,
me, from a DM's perspective, and honestly from a player's perspective, I don't think there's anything wrong with changing how you play a character as you continue to play more sessions.
mm-hmm,
Whenever I make character backstories, and this is like a way that I do backstories, I don't write an incredible amount and I leave it very, very open,
mm-hmm,
because I like coming up with it at the table. Alcott, the way I imagined him when I originally wrote his backstory, is not even anywhere close to how I play him today. But it is so much fun. Like
well, I mean,
I
you are
think
going to
doing
have
that with characters in general.
yeah, you would. I mean, you hope you're going to have character growth.
Yeah.
It's just I think I think my concern with it ends up being, well, you're playing a valor bard. It's like, well, what happens if you decide that that's not the play style that you want? I guess as a DM you could let them change it, come up with a way
Yeah.
to change your subclass. It can get a little messy depending on what kind of stories what the story is, especially the personal character arc, because that becomes a very big change. So you hopefully have a very flexible, forgiving DM.
Yeah. I mean, for example, in the podcast that I produce, Heart of Adventure, we have a bard who's also a multi-classed fighter gunslinger, but he started out as a valor bard, and eventually the bard who is the guy who's playing the bard decided he wanted his bard to have more abilities different to just combat because he was also classing into fighter, and we met up with an npc bard who was a glamour bard. He was an eladrin, a Feywild elf, basically. And our DM let him essentially teach him the ways of glamour, and he just swapped subclasses. But it made sense within the narrative why that happened, which I think is totally cool. Work with your DM, and try and find a solution that works. But yeah.
All right. I'm going to put up a poll.
Okay.
Uh,
A pole. Is it going to be a 10-foot pole? Is it a pole that Moose wants to see Alcott's replacement character dance on? Because apparently that is the request that has been made of me. Long pole.
Yeah.
I always
All
love
right.
that a 10-foot pole was like that is the thing that every adventurer needs.
Let's see.
Oh, I have to dance. Me, Thomas? Oh no. No, I can't do
Poll is up.
that.
Would you
Please
be
don't make me do
interested in
that.
an all bard one shot? Yes? No? Yes, yes, yes! Or yes, but must perform.
Oh God.
So if
See,
you're.
actually, this is fun. Because I like pointing out people in the community that do cool stuff. You guys should check out Bombarded. If you have not heard of Bombarded before, they're a Texas-based music group called Lindby, and they're all musicians in the same band that are also nerds, and they decided to start playing D&D as bards. And have you heard of this before?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but go ahead.
Every single session they write a song. They randomly roll the chords that they will be using on D8s, and throughout their sessions, they're like 80 some odd in, they learn more and more about music theory, which all of them are very aware of. They have like master's degrees in music theory, and that they'll teach it as their characters learn it as they're going through college. And they make a song every single session, and it's so cool. I love it. And
That
the songs have magical effects that take place in the world around them. It's pretty
that's
neat.
awesome.
Oh,
So
it's such a
far
great
we've
thing.
got 0 for yes, 0
I'm
for
gonna
no,
link it.
2 for yes, 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 and 3 yes but must perform. Come on, I'm sure there are others out there who have thoughts on that. All right. Yeah. So we mentioned escaping, kind of escaping the mold. I mean, again, if you want to play the cliche bard, there really, honestly, there is nothing wrong with that. Um, the only thing, and as a DM, the only thing I can tell you is be make sure that you understand who it is that's running your game. Um, Mostly because yes, you can go try to seduce everything, and yes, you may roll a natural 20. That does not mean things are going to go the way you hoped.
Yeah, you're totally,
Um,
totally right.
I mean, seducing a dragon's all well and good. That could have some unfortunate side effects. Just,
Really good.
just throwing out there.
Uh, oh gosh, it would be fun. We should, a lot of people want to see some performance from bards. Those people that are interested in that, you should check out Bombarded first and foremost. But it would be fun to get some people on here who are musicians to come and play some bards in an all bards one shot. I think that would be really cool.
So yeah, Tom, I guess you missed the one shot that I was in. So I end up getting kind of suckered into uh, singing for my song,
Oh
for my
yeah.
spells. It's one of those things where you're sitting there and you're basically in chat and you're just riffing off lyrics for stuff and basically changing lyrics as you're going along. It's another thing having to do that while you're trying to figure out what your spell you're casting
Yep.
next, and
Yep.
and then
God,
making sure it's one that you can actually sing.
it is incredible that Sam Riegel was able to do what he did. That man, his brain, I don't know how it works, but There are
we
some
actually
cool bards to take inspiration from out there.
we had a combat where I actually had to hold my turn because I was still working on the lyrics for the spell that I wanted to cast.
Oh, you know who's a really good bard that you can check out on a blue box one shot that occurred
Ooh.
is John. When John, not John DM John Demon Gunned.
Oh,
He played a bard in the one shot the Tailspire one shot that was run.
nice.
And he was so funny and good. He did such a good job.
Vent Wickman is another one. Chad is the all hell's going to break loose bard. Just be prepared. Lots of
I
fun,
love it.
but yeah. All right. Let's see. Checking to see anyone have any questions because I
I
saw
don't
that Jay
believe
has
so.
gone live.
Then I
Actually,
think
Thomas, do you
we
have
can
anything?
raid.
Yeah, Thomas, do you have anything in closing that you want to talk about?
I don't believe so. I think like the main thing is there's so many options when it comes to bards. Don't limit yourself to just the same old minstrel who does the but also if that's what you want to play at the same time, don't listen to me and please play that. Just understand that there's a lot of options other than a bard is just a minstrel who has a lute and sings really well. There's so many ways to play a bard and you can have a lot of fun with it.
And I would go as far to add, especially if it's one thing if you're doing a one shot, but if you're playing in a campaign, talk to the person running your game. Find
Yeah.
out what what kind. Find get just not don't have them tell you any secrets, but get an idea of what types of bards might be useful or
Yeah.
interest fit well into the campaign story.
Or might already exist within their setting. Like and I mentioned this earlier, a very common name for bards that you hear in fantasy is the Gleeman, which is a person who is meant specifically and only to make people happier because of how ugly and dark the world is around them.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's how grim dark your campaign setting is, really try and lean into that as a bard. Like you are the joy of the people around you, and that can be something that you maybe despise as a bard, the fact that when people look at you they see happiness and you're just stuck with this job because you just happen to be talented or whatever.
Definitely an interesting thought. All right, so Thomas, why don't you have do you want to go over things that you have going on?
Sure. You can first and foremost check me out here on Blue Box. This Sunday we will have all of our party members back after our Markov and Alcott little one shot that we had last week in the Tome of Terror. We will be back inspecting the town of Sandpoint, hopefully saving it from more and more badness that it keeps finding itself in. I also, like I mentioned earlier, I produce a podcast that I have taken a small hiatus from, but will soon be finishing up the last few episodes of our campaign that we did. It is called Heart of Adventure. It is the name of my username on Twitch. You can find it literally anywhere you can find podcasts. If you manage to listen to podcasts somewhere and you can't find that, let me know, and I will get it on there. I promise. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I have a lot of fun, and you can check me out on the Discord if you have questions about literally anything. I love answering and talking about stuff.
Excellent.
That's me.
So yeah, for me, this is actually this is wrapping up a very busy
Seems
6
like it.
days, 5 days. I don't even remember anymore. It's all blurring into one.
That's your
Um,
own dang fault.
yeah, I know. I listen. It's not a bad thing. Friday nights you can always find me here in Discord, running the Friday Nights Crusade game. Castles and Crusades, all welcome to join. I will take whoever shows up. The player's handbook is free from one of our wonderful sponsors, Trollord Games.
Huzzah.
So if you're in Discord, just check out the Friday Night Crusades channel, the pinned messages, and you'll be able to find the link to the free PDF of the player's handbook. Uh, Beyond that, I've got a bunch of one shots that are coming up that I'm playing in. Most of them are going to be running on the Rainbows and Razor Blades Twitch channel. It's R&R Productions. Goodness, there's going to be playing Viking Death Squad. Uh, um, I think it's a horror game called Vason. I'm not entirely sure. There's other stuff too. But
Cool
yeah,
stuff.
there's going to be a lot of one shots. I think I'm also playing in like a four. I think the horror one. I think I'm actually playing in a 4-part campaign. For in the month of May on Mondays. I've got a podcast, not my own, that I'm in. It was Natural Play that was done a couple months ago on the Lady Blackbird free TTRPG. Uh, we have a cast interview that is coming up, and then after that, we will. They're hoping to release the full-on podcast of the actual play soon after that. There are other things. You can always find me on Sundays, usually in the Blue Box, chat during streams. After that, Time with Wife's chat. I'm a moderator there as well. And then, I usually hang out as long as I can stay awake into the night with Lord Gazumba. So,
Huzzah. Which is where we're headed right after this.
yes, speaking of which, let me set up the raid.
I already have it ready to go. I
Oh,
can type it in and set it. But
hmm.
as I type it in, you
Hey,
want to walk us through the question?
yes. So, if you've been watching our episode of Loremasters Arcanum or any other show here on Blue Box, and you like what you see, but you have not yet followed,
Oh gosh,
oh please hit
that's
the
way quicker.
please hit the little part. And or if you had followed but have not yet subbed, or if you've subbed and gasp, your sub has expired, we here at Blue Box have one question for you. What are
What are you
you
doing?
doing? Give us a follow, give us a sub, and we will see you then.
Yes, in 5 seconds we will head over to Lord December. We'll give them a good old raid, and we will see you guys next time on Sunday. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
We're rated.